Oh, okay. We're going to play a short video that was played at the convention. Not everybody attended the convention, so we thought it was kind of nice to see and place a name to the face and sequence of events and things.
Police officer Tyler Moldovan, the 22-year-old, is still in extremely critical condition and fighting for his life tonight after he was shot
A Phoenix police officer remains in the hospital. 22-year-old Tyler Moldovan in critical condition after being shot multiple times.
Clinging to hope.
Officer Tyler Moldovan is on life support here at St. Joseph's
Tyler
Hospital.
is in the hospital
We're told
fighting
that
for
he was
his life
shot
after an
8
overnight
times,
shooting.
once in the head.
It was Monday night, and we both left for work, ready to finish our week, planning to spend Tuesday decorating the Christmas tree. It was going to be our first Christmas married, and just like that, our lives changed.
We may have an officer down. I need several units coming this way.
We got married May 15th, 2021, about 2 months after you graduated the police academy. You were about 9 months on the force before our lives changed forever. I was at work when I had received the call that my husband was in critical condition at St. Joe's, and there was some officers that were going to come get me. They drove lights and sirens to where I could meet his family as we waited upon the news of his condition. At this point, we had known that he had been shot. We didn't know where, how, and I remember his 2 doctors coming out and telling us that he had been shot multiple times.
Suspect shot him 8 times, including once in the head.
He had said some in the legs, some in the arms, and in the head. I remember thinking, the head. There's no way this is going to be fixable by man.
To pray for a miracle in Tyler's recovery.
This community are hoping for a miracle.
It was almost impossible. And it was so shocking to hear. Anything I ever knew about trauma, treating gunshot wounds, it was all out the window. All the scenarios that had run through my head just disappeared. We had spent a few hours praying and waiting in the ICU waiting room while they cleaned him up and prepared him for us to see. We briefly saw him wheel into the unit, and I remember just seeing him sitting upright, intubated, and thinking, this is not good. This was not going to be okay.
Tonight's big story, clinging to hope as a beloved Phoenix police officer continues to fight for his life.
I remember asking to just see him alone, and I remember looking at him when I walked into the room. My instinct was to go right up to him and hug him through all the tubes and the equipment and machine. And I remember just telling him over and over that I'm so sorry, that I love you, that I wasn't mad at you, and that we were going to be okay, and I didn't know how, but we will. As people came in and out, I remember hearing the doctors tell us that he probably won't make it through the night. And since I didn't leave his bedside, they were telling our family in the waiting room that this was their time to say goodbye. And even if he did make it through the night, he'd pretty much have no quality of life. And I just couldn't. I couldn't tell him goodbye even when others were. I just remember this peace, this strength that was so overpowering. I knew it wasn't my own. It was an unshakable faith that Tyler was going to be a miracle. So I held on to it, and it surpassed all understanding. And for a little while, some thought it was denial, because the impossible would have to be done. But I took God at his word. So he made it through the night, and the next few days he was fighting between life and death, critically unstable in every direction. A few nights later, his lung function began to fail, and then shortly his heart would follow too. And it was beats away from stopping again. Having already been resuscitated the first time with extreme measures, there was no saying he'd come back this time around. And in the moment of despair, of all hopelessness, God was there, and he brought upon this peace that he was just not going home.
This would be a miracle of all miracles if he has a full recovery, and we believe he can.
Every day after, things began to progress. He became medically stable. He started to open his eyes, crack a smile. He would have his trach and G-tube placed. He'd go on to have his EVD drain removed. And after a few weeks, we began physical and speech therapy as we waited to transfer to Craig Hospital in Colorado for their extensive neuro rehab program. So after about 6 weeks in the ICU, we began the rehab program. We spent 5 days a week in therapies as he worked to relearn the basic functions of life: speaking, breathing, eating, touching his fingers together, throwing a ball, and slowly parts of him would come to life, and it was miracle after miracle happening.
After being shot 8 times back in December, at that point he was given very little hope to live. Recent updates, though, show some pretty remarkable progress.
He was on the brink of death and now showing tremendous improvement.
We were discharged home after a long 4.5 months, and it was the greatest day of our lives since the injury. And since we have been home, the miracles only continue. He had officially weaned off the ventilator. He had recently had his trach removed. And we continue 5 days a week with therapies as we await for the Lord's timing in his recovery. And all the glory goes to God, who has written this so perfectly and has performed each miracle that no man could do alone. There have been days where sickness and weariness try to shake our faith, and it hasn't been easy by all means, but the Lord has granted us a strength that only he could give, an indescribable peace that just surpasses all understanding. There was this unshakable faith that Tyler would be a living, breathing, walking, and talking testimony. I had no idea how it would happen, but God did. And he always has the final say. And as of today, Tyler is a living, breathing, talking testimony, and with the Lord's will, a walking testimony. And I would do this 1,000 times again to see the miraculous works of God, to testify of our living God, who has been so gracious and merciful to us when we're so undeserving of his love. And he's the only promise keeper and man of his true word, and we give all the glory to him.
So this is a much larger audience than, well, we've ever been used to. That Bible verse, Matthew 17:20, was a Bible verse that took us through a lot of days, and it's on your chairs because it's a reminder of what size a mustard seed is and the faith that got us through. Many times it was that size, very little, and you don't even realize when God says the size of a mustard seed is all you need. It really was. I'll let Adina start, and we'll give some background. Okay. I'm Camelia, Opat. I'm Chelsea's mom. Adina and I actually go back a long time ago. I was in her wedding as a bridesmaid. Never did we think that 21 years later, our kids would marry. So it's funny how your journey goes. Chelsea, I've been married since I was 19 to Radu Opat. Chelsea is our first daughter, firstborn. She truly is very special from the day she was born, from when she was little. She was a very unusual child. She was just always a little angel. She was never one to have a problem, to turn a word to. She was the perfect child. And as she grew, she was very close to God. She was she wasn't one that was openly. She quietly loved, worshiped, and had a very prayerful life. After Chelsea was born, 3 years later, we had a son who, at 16 weeks, while I'm a nurse and I was at work, and back in the day, you used to do some peak ultrasounds. I found out that while by myself in an ultrasound room that our son had trisomy 18, which, if anybody knows, it's a form of Downs, but a much more severe form of Downs. And when this was 2 a.m, I had to go home and tell my husband that our son is really, really sick, and I don't know what will be. Went to the doctors to find out that if he makes it, he will be a completely dependent on a ventilator, dependent on us for care. He would not have any substantial life. We chose, despite that, as you know, in today's world, even more so now, we had a lot of doctors tell us to have an abortion. That was not what God tells us to do, and that is not what our faith, and that's not what we believed we carried, because we knew that whatever that journey was, no matter how hard it was going to be, whether it was a day or whether it was 20 years or whatever it would be, that God would take us through. And God doesn't always answer our prayers the way we want them to, but he answers, and he will take you and he'll carry you. And we had a planned C-section in hopes to see him alive. And on the way to the hospital, I turned to my husband. I said, I think Jeremiah died. And I got to the hospital, and he had. So I had to go through labor and deliver our son, who had a place in our life and had a place in this journey that took us through a lot of challenges when we found out Tyler got shot. And then we had another daughter later who, as you might be able to figure out why, her name is Grace, because God had grace and he gave us her, and she's full of life. And so we just have 2 daughters. And Chelsea met Tyler, and I said, who's Tyler? And she said his last name, which I actually knew already who he was, but I wanted her to kind of navigate it on her own. And she fell in love with Tyler, and they started talking and dating, and yes, she was 15 when they started talking, because, you know, that's how today's world starts, is talking. So she was 15 and he was 16, and they've been inseparable since, and now they truly have a love story.
I have some notes, we have notes on our phone, but this is not my cup of tea. I've only done it a few times in my life, and I don't really particularly enjoy it, but we know that we want to glorify God's name and speak of his glory. My name's Adina, Moldovan. I was born in Romania, Arad, Romania. I came here when I was 10. We came in Cleveland, Ohio. We lived there for almost 7 years. I came with my parents and brother and sister and my grandmother. In 1987, almost 7 years later, we moved to Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, with my parents and 2 siblings. I had a little sister that was born in Cleveland as well, so then that was 4 of us. I moved to Arizona. I was 16 and a half when we moved to Arizona, and my husband had just moved from Portland, Oregon, and we started dating shortly after. In 87, we got married in 89. We were 18 and 19, babies. In 1991, we had Gabrielle. She's 31 now and has 3 beautiful, healthy children. Then we had Matthew, 92. He has 3 beautiful, healthy children, and 1 on the way, due in June. And then we had Mark in 1994, May of 1994, we had Mark Daniel, and he was our first child that we lost. We almost lost Tyler, but we did not. December 4th of 1994, he was 6 months old. It was a beautiful sunny Sunday morning, as most mornings are in Arizona. We were getting ready to go to church. Gabrielle was 3 and a half, Matthew was 2 and a half, and Mark was 6 months. We were getting ready to go to church. We had him dressed for church. He woke up early, and I would put him down for a quick nap before church while I got the other kids ready. And Dan was getting the other 2 kids in a car, and I went to grab him from his crib so I can get him in a car seat and go to church. I opened the door, and I realized immediately that something was wrong. He was pale white, he was face down, and I could tell his body was limp. I completely lost it, and I just screamed and obviously called 911, and we live on an acre, so we had the helicopter land on our front yard and picked him up to the hospital. And when we got to we drove. My husband does real estate, so he knows Phoenix like the back of his head. He didn't even know where he was going. He kept saying, "Where am I going? What street?" And we made it to the hospital. We were invited in a small little room, and that's when we were told that Mark has passed. It's an indescribable day, and there are no words to describe, humanly words to describe the pain and agony and a mother feels when she hears those words. I can't, unless anybody's gone through them.
undescribable. I thought I lost my mind. So we went through all the, funeral and everything else. For about 2 years, I was a complete disaster, beside the fact that I had 2 other toddlers that I needed to care for. I felt like he was the only one in the world that I had. But then 1996, 2 years later, we had a beautiful daughter, Nicolette. She's 26, has a beautiful baby boy, 9 months old. And she healed my heart in many ways. Then I had a 1998, I had a miscarriage. And I think God gave me that miscarriage because, I used to talk to a lot of ladies at church, and we were very involved in church. And I used to talk to a lot of ladies and would say, oh, I had a miscarriage. And I was so not sympathetic with them. I thought, oh, you had a miscarriage, big deal. I lost a 6-month-old. I don't really, I had such a, I would never say it, but in my heart, I just was so, judgmental that, your miscarriage is so unimportant, but, and I think that's why God let me feel that pain too. And it was kind of a late, miscarriage. I was a little boy. And again, it broke my heart into many pieces. That was November 23rd of 1998. And, we passed through that. And then 1999, tried again, because my husband's like, man, you're determined. I really wanted 4 kids. That was always my dream. November 12, 1999, we had Tyler. And he completed our family, happy, healthy, 4 beautiful children, We were, like I said, we were involved in church. We had a beautiful family, extended family on both sides. Everybody lived in Arizona, nearby. I mean, we had birthday parties, a lot of fun events. We were traveling the world with the kids, without the kids. We're on top of the world. Everything was great. From all aspects of life, we felt, blessed. And we felt many times on top of the mountain, and you'd see other people in the valley lows, and, we pray and sympathize with them. But it's nice to be on top of the mountain, right? And then we married our children. Gabrielle, 12 years ago. Matthew, 3 years later. Nicolette, 3 years after that. Tyler, the baby, married May 15, 2021. I mean, we had a, beautiful, fun engagement. COVID year, middle of COVID, we all went to California, Carlsbad, and proposed on the beach. Both sides were there. I mean, everything was, picture perfect. And we continue with our lives. Life was great. Like I said, people, especially after Tyler got married, 7 months after he had got married, the incident happened. But since he got married, Dan and I were empty nesters, and we continued to travel and enjoy life. And we felt so blessed and honored that all 4 of our children had gotten married. So we're 4 generations at Happy Valley Church. We attend Happy Valley Church. We met there. We got married there. Our children were born there. We took them, to their dedication at that church. They were baptized in that church. They all 4 got married in that church. That was a dream of mine, of ours as parents. They are in their own homes. They have careers. They're successful. They're doing wonderful. And people would come and say, oh my goodness, what did you do? Your kids and I, and you feel like you live a picture perfect life. We look at Instagram and everybody looks so beautiful and so, their lives are perfect. But we know that everybody deals and battles something. And, we're enjoying our empty nesting for 7 short months. Loving to visit with the kids and the grandkids, always having them over, traveling with them. I mean, it was just a dream of ours. And I thank God. I didn't take it lightly. I thank God every day for that blessing, because you do everything you can as parents to raise them in the church, but we know that that's not always the case. And I have friends that have children in the world, and my heart breaks for them, and I pray for them all the time. I'm not any better than any other parent. We did our best, but you have no guarantees. Sometimes the kids choose their own path, and that's not our path.
our gods. And, I felt like, oh my gosh, my kids were just like these perfect children, wonderful children. And, we got along, we have a good relationship with them. And it was just a dream, every parent's dream. And then everything shattered again. December of 21, everything shattered again. And once again, we were reminded that we're in the valley lows. So, and I remember talking to my husband quite a few times, and I said, if I could ask God one thing is, why are we on top of the mountain, like on top of the world, top of the mountain, and then we're in the gutter, like it's so low that you can think, can we just, kind of be somewhere in the middle, like, mai oboală un pic, mai una, mai, to kind of keep you close to God, but not like, you're here and then you're there. There's just no in between. Why, God? Why? And then, of course, when everything happened to Tyler, I said, why us again? We've been through this. I've already lost a son. Why do I need to lose again? Does anybody in this church has lost two sons but me, And then I remember a sister who sits kind of across, an older sister who sits kind of across the aisle from me. She's so sweet, and she lost two sons. And I said, yeah, well, so Rahel lost two sons. Of course, I'm not an exception, And it's just, it's shattering. It's to go through that again. But, and there's some events that I want to talk about, because I want to mention how we realized that this was all coordinated by God. It was God's plan and grace through it all, but God's plan. And the events that took place, we later realized why they happened, because this was God's plan. Camelia talked about our history. We loved planning our children's engagement and shower and wedding. I mean, it was a joke with our kids. They said, they would ask, we had two wedding coordinators, and they would ask, so what do you want this? And then the kids would say, ask the moms. They know best. Like, poor kids. They had no chance. But we had fun. I'm going to read a little bit because I'm also a little emotional. Tyler's personality, just like Camelia said, he was the golden child. Even his siblings would always tease him. You're the perfect child. You're the perfect child. You can't do no wrong. It was always a joke in our family. And he was that child. Nu ne întorcea vorba, vorbea frumos, respectful, straight A's, like just such a great kid. And friends with everybody, with us. And, a year and a half before he got married, he decided he wanted chickens in our backyard. And my husband was like, no, we're not getting chickens. And he said, no, let me do it, Dad. Come on, we live on an acre and a quarter. I said, let him have chickens. Kids, how many boys being 19 years of age want to raise chickens? And he had a garden. He had a garden too, a beautiful garden. And mind you, I could barely keep my plants green. And I was so proud of him. And he was, in school. He had a partial scholarship at Arizona State University. Going to school, working. He was working for us at that time. Bible study with Chelsea, friends. And Dan said, no, it's going to be a mess. Not by night. We gave him a quarter in the backyard, and he did it, and we were so proud of him. And I said, my gosh, he comes home from work and goes and feeds his chickens, and he lets them out because we had a lot of green grass, and, he's watering his garden. He gets up early in the morning, and I said, oh my gosh, the perfect child, and every mother's dream. And then he decided, he came home one day and he said, I want to join the police academy. And I about had a heart attack, because this was a dream of his since he was a child, but I thought it was a dream, and every child's going to outgrow that. And I thought, no. I said to Tyler, no, this is no. And Dan and I did absolutely everything to discourage him. We prayed. We fasted to see if it's God's will. We even bribed him. We said, Tyler, if you stay and work for us, we will pay you double what they're paying you at the police department. Just don't go. You're going to get married. You're going to have a wife. What if something bad happens? He goes, Mom, how many police officers are out there? Not everybody gets shot and killed. And, I said, yeah, but it only takes one. Anyway, we went on, and we couldn't change his mind. And then that's when we actually, ne-am rugat. As a family, we fasted, we prayed, ne-am pus semne, and all the signs came that he should go forth with it. So at that time, we had to trust God, and we had to join him. His wife supported him. His fiancé then supported him, and we lost the game. We lost the battle, so we had to join him. And, you know, going forward, we did. And
I would add that just like God prepared, He prepared Chelsea too. She also went to ASU. She was going to do PA. She did graduate with her bachelor's the week before they got married. So imagine, we had many events in a matter of 3 months. We had the engagement, we had the shower, and the wedding. She didn't get a graduation. She still reminds us today because she had COVID. So she didn't have COVID, but it was during COVID, and they didn't do graduation. So she got cheated out of it, if you will. But when she went to school, she needed, in order to be able to get into PA school, they do look to see, and PA school is physician assistant. She was looking to, she needed hours, and she really wanted to work in the ER. I'm by background an ER nurse, and I wanted to get her a job at the ER that had the geriatric patients, because I wanted to keep her safe, and I didn't want her to see all the things that you see in the other ERs. I was very familiar in the ER she wanted to work, but for some reason, my director friend would not interview her. But the ER I didn't want her to work in wanted to. And of course, they loved her and took her. And that ER is a level 1 trauma center, which means it's the most critical of ERs. They take everything, gunshot wounds, missing body parts. She's seen it all. And she was a ripe age of 20s, young girl. Not what I wanted. I didn't want her to be in that ER. I wanted her to be in the geriatric one. But I think really God put her there because it prepared her for the rest of the months that she faced caring for Tyler. And when I say she truly cares, she has not left his side since December 14th. She has been there, and she has faithfully been there in prayer, in love. I remember that night when she called. To this day, I panic if my phone rings and it's from her, because I missed that call that night. And luckily, she had enough foresight to tell my dad to come wake me up. To tell me, Mommy, you need to go to St. Joe's. And I knew what St. Joe's is. It's a level 1 trauma center. It's downtown. It's right where Tyler works. And she said, the police are taking me there. And when she said that, I thought everything was over. And I didn't even know what to think. I knew it was bad, because police doesn't come and pick you up at work to take you downtown. It's about a 30-minute drive from where she worked. And so that I'll never forget that night. But all this time that God just prepared her for that day. And shortly before that night, on December 1st, she asked us as parents, with Tyler, the both of them, and asked that our families join in prayer and fasting. She had called me, it was 2 days before that. She had texted me, and she said, Mommy, would you be disappointed if I didn't go to PA school? Because she knew that because she knew her dad. She is a daddy's girl through and through, and he'd be whatever. But she knew that I would just probably be a little more heartset or heartbroken, because it kind of follows in your footsteps. I didn't want her to be a nurse, in all honesty. But I thought medical profession's still good. PA is a pretty good life. You can work as needed, and there's a lot of great opportunities. But she said, would you be disappointed? And of course I said no, but I offered her a couple other options of what else she could do, because as any good parent would. But ultimately I said, Chelsea, you have to do what's right. She said, I just feel like there's more to this than this. There's more to, God wants more from us. And I don't know what it is, but I know God wants more. And we stayed in prayer and fast that day, and 14 days later, God had a bigger plan.
So around the time that the accident happened, and I'm only telling you this because it leads to the next event. Diane and I were out of town for 5 days. It was my birthday is December 10th, so we got away a little bit. We were in Napa. And then we spent the last night in Monterey. And coming home, we have that My Life app. And then here's my perfect child again. Atât sunam, I kept calling him at night because he still had a curfew, even though he was an adult. Like, you need to come home, and I would wait for him. So he said, Mom, let me put this My Life app on your phone, and you can track me wherever I am. And because, when you call me, he goes, all my friends say, oh my gosh, your mom's calling you again. You're like 20 years old, It's embarrassing, but he always would answer my call, and he was so sweet, or text me, I can't talk right now, but So he actually put that app on my phone as a teenager so I can track him. And I just love that kid. And I would forget I had the app, and I'd still call him. And so Dan was looking on the app, and he said, oh, hey, we're driving into town. We're about, 5 minutes away from the area that he worked. He said, oh, Tyler's parked somewhere on one of the streets. You want to stop by and say hi? And I said, oh, yeah, absolutely. So, we pulled up to him. There was 3 other police officers' cars parked on the same street. They were all doing paperwork. We put our window down. It was 11:04 p.m. On December 13th. But wait, my husband said, actually, he said, never mind. Can we go another night? I'm so exhausted. We drove 12 hours. Let's go home. We'll go another night. Because we would periodically stalk him. He was the baby of the family. Like his brother-in-law, Johnny, 32, Johnny stalked him all the time, would take pictures and send them to us. I mean, all his siblings would stalk him at work. And he used to say, if I ever get fired, it's because of you guys. You guys can't show up at work wherever I am. And, hey, So we pulled up. And Diane said, oh, no. I said, no, let's go tonight. And Diane said, okay, let's go. If something happens, you'll never forgive me. And I said, well, you better believe it. And we pulled up, we said hi. He said, oh, ați ajuns. You guys got in because we were texting and he knew we were gonna arrive soon. We talked for about 2 minutes because he got a call and he left. And then we went home, got in bed. Of course, I texted him, hey, was the call okay? I mean, are you okay, And I would text, I go to bed really late. Dan gets up really early, so we were constantly texting, did you make it? One shift is over. And it was a joke. Dan would tell me in the morning, oh, Tyler's home. He's on his way home. His shift was 8:30 to 6:30. Yeah. So, texting until the wee hours of the night and then early in the morning, and Dan's like, another shift is done. And I said, who are we kidding? He's got like 20,000 shifts to go. And we just always had this fear that something might happen. And got home, I was texting with him. Dan fell asleep, and I was just texting with him until about 1:30 a.m. And I said, good night, love you, I'm going to bed. I'm tired. He said good night. And then an hour later, we got the call. And I remember, because it's quiet, so I remember I heard everything. Dan didn't have to tell me. He said, this is Officer so-and-so. Your son has been shot. It's critical. It's life-threatening. Come to the hospital now. And I lost it again. But I think I lost it in a level that so much harder than with Mark, because Mark was 6 months, Tyler was 22, 21. Oh, yeah, 21. He said, we're trying to get a hold of Chelsea. Chelsea's not answering. I said, yeah, because she's at work. She's a Thunderbird. She's at work. I said, just go get her. Don't call. Just go get her. And they went to get her, picked her up. We drove again to the hospital. They told us which hospital. Dan and I got to the hospital. We parked the car. And it's silent. It's dark. It's silent. We look up and we said, oh, my God, we're at the wrong hospital. And I think the trauma in our heads from December 4th, 1994, we went to the exact same hospital where we went for our son Mark. And we looked at each other, we said, oh my God, like, this is crazy. This is not even the hospital. How could we have? It's only a mile away, so we went a mile back and went to the right hospital. We got in. There were police officers everywhere, hundreds of them, and cars parked, and we walked in, and you feel like everybody's looking at you, and you're just kind of walking, looking at the ground and shaking, and we had no idea what we're walking into. And they said, oh, come in this little room, come and sit down in this room. when I heard that again, because first time we were invited in that room, we knew it was bad news. They only put you in that room to tell you, your loved ones didn't make it. So we were in that room again, and I said, no, I'm not going in that room. I said to Dan, I'm not going to go in that room. I'm not. I've been there. I know what that means. I'm going to stay out here. They said, no, everybody's in that room. Chelsea's in there. Everybody, you had gotten there, we called all of our kids. Our son got there before us. He drove 150 miles. He told us later. His brother, Matthew, Matthew adores Tyler, even though he's the younger one. They're 7 years apart. We went in the room, but I said, I just want to know if he's alive. And they said, we don't know. Nobody came to tell us anything. I don't even know how long it was. At least a good hour. We had no idea. Nobody could tell. The police officers were pretending they're going to go ask the doctors, but no one went in there. And that's how it was. It was the beginning of a long journey. Our prayer that night, driving to the hospital, was that Diana and I said, okay, God, if you spare his life, we want him to be 100%, because he's now married. He's not dependent on us. As parents, we'll care for him in a wheelchair or in bed for as long as we live. But he's married now. He has a wife. So I said, if you give him back to us, we want him back 100%, not handicapped, not headaches, not outbursts. I don't know what side effects you can have from being shot in the head. We want him to be back 100%. And that was our main prayer. He's on his way to being 100%. We know he will be. It just takes time. Do you want to add anything to that? Did I miss anything?
No, you didn't miss anything. On that night, I remember when finally someone came in, one of the doctors, and it references the drain, because they said he is alive. We need to put in a drain in his brain so that we can take the pressure off of his brain from the bullet that entered. And I remember just seeing my daughter, and it's so hard, 'cause all I could think of, and I remember saying this to her over and over, I wish it was me in that bed. I wish I could take it all away from you. And sometimes I still say it because I'm human, despite that God has given us a lot of faith. And he has been there, and there's been a lot of lows through this. And you'll see some of the pictures. That room was really small, and as you can see, Adina and I are just sitting there on the sides of the bed, because honestly, we would say that all the time. She would say it, I would say it, and finally Chelsea said, stop saying it. Do you really think that's any easier? There's a plan, and God is great, and you have to have faith. And 3 days after he got shot, there was a night where Chelsea was texting us because he was not doing well. They allowed her to stay even though it was COVID. This is why we say God has been in the plan every step of the way. By a true miracle, they allowed her to stay overnight, which during that time was it just didn't happen in the ICU. Sometimes they didn't even let family in. And she stayed overnight, and she stayed there for a solid 3 weeks every night. She pretty much had like a little house there. I don't know if she had a picture. I didn't look to see if she had a picture included of where she had her little setup of her bed and table. And but she started texting that his oxygen saturation was dropping and that Tyler is starting to have some lung compromise. And I remember I could just tell that, you know your daughter. And Chelsea's really, really strong, but I'm her mom and I can still read through her. So I stopped the texting and I called her and I said, Chelsea, are you okay? And you could hear in her voice that it wasn't her. She was trying to be strong, but she was struggling seeing this happen and him declining. And I said, do you want me to come? And she said, I don't know if they'll let you.
And then I texted you privately and I
Uh-huh.
said, Camelia, go to the hospital now. And yeah, because it was not good.
And it wasn't. I got there and I could quickly, as I said, I was a nurse, so I could quickly tell that the circumstances weren't good. His oxygenation, even though that he was ventilated and full support, so you can't get more than that from oxygenation, was low 80s, 70s. And then I called Adina. I said, because I would never want, we got along so well, and it's my daughter and her son, and she has to be there. God forbid something would to happen. And I said, you have to come. And she came right away, and then shortly after she got there, he declined further. And we were outside the room, because at that point, they were needing to be in the room. And I was sitting there with Chelsea. I've seen my daughter pray, but in those 6 weeks at St. Joe's, where I was there every single day, I said, you've never gotten so much of your mother as you have in the last 6 weeks, because I was there with her every single day. I have never seen her pray so hard for something. And she prayed, God, I know you have a plan, and I know that he's going to make it. And she prayed for him to make it that night, and he did. Despite that, as she's sitting there praying, they're bringing the code cart, which if you're in healthcare at all, you know that that's when they're bringing extra medicine to bring his heart back up if he needs to, shock him if they need to. And then they started priming the medicine, and someone who's been there, all I could think of is, he's going to die tonight. And then the doctors came to Adina and Chelsea and asked, because now they had given him, they actually did use some of the drugs in the code cart, and because his heart rate had dropped so significantly, to bring it back up, they had already bronched him to try to get fluid out of his lungs, but he wasn't coming back up.
Yeah, that night, the 17th, which was just 3 days later, that night again marked us, because we felt like 3 days we had hope. Okay, here we go. At first we were counting every hour, and then every 2 hours, then he made it to 3 hours, then he made it through the night, and we were hanging on to everything. And like Camelia said, the parents were allowed to stay there from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Chelsea got to stay 24 hours, which was a blessing. And we would be there at 8 and leave at 8. And then when Camelia called and said, come to the hospital, it's not looking good. Dia and I got dressed really fast. Fratele Cornel and Dana had just left our house. We're very good friends. Fratele Cornel and Dana got married the same month as us, 30 days apart. They have 4 kids. We have 4 kids. We vacation with them. We were very close. They were by our side through every traumatic event and through every happy event. Tyler's graduation from the academy, Fratele Cornel came and prayed over him. We had a party. And anyway, that was just a little parenthesis about it. So they were over, they left. We dashed to the hospital. And when we walked in, they were working on him. Camelia and Chelsea and her dad were out in the hallway, and they were working on him in the room. There were doctors and everybody around him. And I, again, like, oh no, this is good, this is it. And the end said, just be grateful. We had 3 days. We got to say goodbye. And of course, they were planning the funeral this whole time. Fratele Cornel and the chaplain from the police department was planning the funeral. We talked about pictures and how we're going to do it. And the police said they need like 2 days. And then Fratele Cornel said, well, we need a day or 2. And the adult children said, absolutely not. We're not going through 3 days or 4 days of this. This is excruciating. We're not doing it. Let's shorten it. So, 2 days. And anyway, we thought this is it. And they stabilized him. And then they came out. And then 2.5 hours later, it happened again. He crashed again. At that time, we were in his room. We were praying. All of us were just praying. And then 2.5 hours later, he crashed again. And they stabilized him again. And I remember Doctor came and looked me in the eye and said, what would you like me to do if this happens again? And I said, absolutely everything. Everything you did so far, you do it again. You do it 100 times over.
And he looked at me and he said, he won't sustain it the third time. His heart is not strong enough. He's not going to sustain it. And I said, this is it. I said, I'm going to give it my all. I got on my knees in that room with it. It was a full room of people. I didn't care. Some of the top neurosurgeons in the U.S. Everybody was there. I got on my knees. I turned myself against the wall, put my hands up like a child that was punished. That I prayed like I never prayed in my life. I grew up in a godly home. I grew up with wonderful praying parents. But I had never prayed like that in my life. I gave him my all because what did I have to lose? And his oxygen was at 73. His oxygen was at 73, and I knew that if his brain, doesn't have enough oxygen, he's gonna, that has side effects. So I said, I kept saying, I want his oxygen. I was screaming and saying to God, I want his oxygen 95. I want his oxygen 95. Dear God, do you hear me? I mean, I was commanding God to, I want this, I want that. And I remember opening my eyes and my husband would look at me just panicked, like she's lost her mind. And I didn't care. And I mean, I was praying Kalastaruinsa, and I gave him my all. Chelsea was in the hallway praying with her parents in the room back and forth. And I remember in 15 minutes, his oxygen was at 95. And it was just God and his love and mercy for us, for him, for Chelsea mainly. That night, and then he never crashed again. That was it. That was the last night he crashed. From then on, he was sort of stabilized, and he was just, day after day of, either a temperature or this or that, or it was ongoing. It was ongoing. He hadn't opened his eyes yet, but at least he was stable. And then that morning, to kind of realize what happened that night, obviously we were a mess. In sleepless nights, I hadn't slept in 38 hours. I couldn't eat, I couldn't drink. For 2 weeks, I just felt like I was gonna vomit. Like every time I'd sit down, I felt like I was pacing the hallways. I couldn't sit, because I don't know, every time I sat, I had a sensation of nausea. And that morning after he crashed, it was about 8 o'clock in the morning. My son-in-law would show up with smoothies almost every morning for us, like protein smoothies. And but also that night, we went in the car. We went in our car, my husband and I, and his married siblings, all 3 other married siblings were on speakers, and we were praying really hard. After he had stabilized, we saw that he was sleeping. We went and we were praying in the car, and we prayed until about 6:30 in the morning. And I finally said, okay, guys, go to bed. You have small kids, go to bed. Dad and I are going to go upstairs. About 8:30, Johnny came with smoothies, and Chelsea said, we had 2 police officers at all 24 hours around the clock at his door. And Chelsea, and I said, let's send the police officers to go get the smoothies. And Chelsea said, no, I want to go get them. And she said, I want to see the kids. And Johnny had brought all their 3 children with him because he wanted to let Gabrielle sleep. And I said, Chelsea, I was personally not even in the mood to see the kids, even though I adore my grandkids. And she said, no, let's go say hi to the kids. So we went, we got the smoothies. And our 5-year-old grandson, he was 5 then, Elias, Johnny said, Elias, tell Chelsea and Booney your dream last night. And he told us the dream, and Chelsea and I just looked at each other and we said, oh my gosh, we knew exactly what happened last night. And then we heard a few other people with testimonies about that night, that specific night. And Elias said, oh, well, there was, and he was shy, and Johnny had to bribe him, just say it again, say it again. And he said there was an angel came in and picked up Tyler, and he was walking away with him. And he was a beautiful angel. He was telling me this like a story. He had gold hair and blue eyes, and he had a beautiful white t-shirt, he said. And he had gold shoes, and he was describing this angel, and he said he picked him up and he was walking away. And there were so many people just crying and so sad. And he said people were praying and crying, and it was just, he said, it wasn't nice here, but he goes, the angel and Tyler were really nice. And then all of a sudden the angel came and brought Tyler back to us, and everybody was so happy, and the angel just walked away. And he just said like a little story, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's what happened that night. And
then we had 6 weeks in the ICU, every day praying over him. You know, Chelsea would have a devotional every night. We left at 8 o'clock. She would have this devotional. We all listened and we did it. We would, you know, pray over his limbs, his body. He was shot in both legs, both arms, head. So the days passed, and on December 24th, it was our Christmas gift. He opened his eyes for the first time, and we were overjoyed. We were overwhelmed with joy. I mean, we were rejoicing. The officers outside were jumping on the chairs outside. I mean, the nurses were taking their masks off. The entire ICU floor was ours, basically. Nobody else counted, it felt like. All the nurses would come in. There was like a show and tell. What did Tyler do today? Oh my gosh, you know, how's his fever? How is this? You know, and the nurses are like rejoicing, running around, jumping, happy, and you know, because Tyler opened his eyes. We thought, okay, tomorrow's Christmas Day. Tomorrow he's gonna say something, do something. You know, we thought, oh my gosh, this is it. You know, that's it. So from December 14th to December 24th, 10 days. Okay, he opened his eyes. He's alive, and he wasn't as critical. Well, the days passed, and he didn't do anything. He just had a blank stare up in the sky, and not only that, we never mentioned, but we had a lot of team meetings. Every morning we had a team meeting with everyone from the neurosurgeons to us to the Chelsea's graduation, because she never had one. And we surprised her at work. Oh, Camelia and I went and brought pizza for everybody and surprised her because she went straight to work from her graduation, which was at home, not even in. We were talking the 24th. The next day, it was Christmas, nothing happened. Oh, the team meetings. We would have these team meetings every morning, and they were excruciating. Poor Chelsea, sometimes she would leave the meeting and go back to Tyler's room and close the door. She couldn't hear it anymore. All you hear is, well, even if he is gonna, live, he's gonna be on a ventilator his entire life, or he's gonna be bedbound. He's never gonna speak, he's never gonna talk. I remember a sweet little Asian doctor, which we became friends afterwards, but initially, I didn't care for her because she walked in that room a few hours after it happened, and she looked at me and said, he will never call you mom, he will never recognize you. I mean, she just looked at everybody and just, the siblings, and it was just, to me, it shattered my heart in a million pieces. And I remember I just stared at her and I thought, oh my gosh. And then, so these team meetings every morning were horrific for us. We were reliving it every single morning. So when Tyler, the next day, he didn't open his eyes, he didn't do anything else. He was just staring in the ceiling. And then the 26th came, December 26th, nothing. We kept praying and praying, and I thought, oh, that's right. Everybody's right. All his neurosurgeons are right. He did wake up, but he's on a ventilator. He's going to be on a ventilator. He's never going to recognize us. He's going to be a vegetable. He's married. What do we do? You can't pull the plug now. He opened his eyes. What do you do? And Chelsea's sweet prayer, Chelsea was terrified that she had to make a decision, because you always felt like you had to make the next decision. And we kept praying. Our prayer was, God, you lead the way. We don't want us to have to make any decisions and make a wrong decision. You lead the way. Every time we had to make a decision, like something cleared up and doors opened or closed, and the decision was made by God. And I remember Dan one morning, I think the 28th in the morning, because I have it in my notes. I kept notes every single day. The morning of the 28th, it was by then it was 4 days of no sign of life other than he opened his eyes. That morning, I remember I walked in that room, every morning, Chelsea would greet us, and sweet Chelsea, God, this girl's an angel, just like her mama said. She would walk in, Camelia and I would go home crying, text till late at night. We'd come to the hospital crying, and we'd walk in the room, and we'd, tired, exhausted, whatever, and Chelsea would say, good morning, he made it through another night, and she would be happy and smiling. We thought, oh my gosh, this girl, she was uplifting us every day for forever. And we thought, my goodness, this 21-year-old young lady has more faith than we do. I said to Camelia, shame on us. And my sister came up with a little mustard seed. She brought them and gave them to everybody in little containers so we can hang on to that and remember, all you need is the faith of a mustard seed. And the 28th was the lowest day for me with Tyler's incident, because since the day, because I walked in and I said to Dan, this is it. This is what we have to deal with now. And I said to Diane, I'm going to fast starting tomorrow. I'm going to fast. I couldn't talk. I didn't eat. That day was just, all I did was cry and prayed, and I didn't even have conversation with most people. And I said, I'm going to start fasting tomorrow, and either I will die from fasting or this child will wake up. I said, that's it. No more. I can't do this now. He's awake, and here we are. La răscruce de drum, cum se zice. And Diane knows when I'm stubborn. When I say something, I mean it. And Diane had talked with Chelsea that morning and said to Chelsea, because she was crying, everybody was upset, and he said, Chelsea, you'll never have to make a decision alone. We'll do it as a family, and whatever happens, it'll be on all of us. And then December 29th, we showed up again, as we always did. And Dan, being the persistent, Dan is very, if anybody knows Dan, he's very persistent and very, he had a great relationship with his boys, but kind of on the tough side, but great relationship. And, even though we had roles in the ICU where you're supposed to keep a quiet demeanor, and there's a brain injury and the lights dimmed, and, we're whispering and our phones were on silent, and, Dan would every single day, all day long, Tyler, can you hear me? Tyler, squeeze my hand. Tyler, stay outside. Tyler, I can't live without you. I mean, even we were like, okay, that's enough. Like, you're just going to stir up a fever, and we were so upset with him sometimes. Just Tyler. And I have to say, Dan, my husband, Dan, is a very tough guy. I've only seen him cry once. We've been married 33 years. This year will be 34. I've only seen him cry once when Mark died, and that was one day, and that was it. And I've never seen him cry. He's not emotional. But this thing with Tyler, oh my gosh, I didn't recognize him. He would cry day and night. I would hear him in the middle of the night, and I turned around. I thought he was awake crying. He was crying in his sleep. He was absolutely devastated. I never saw, and never imagined I would see my husband like this. And then his brother Matthew was another disaster. And he just couldn't come to senses with what happened. And the 29th, Diane walked in the room again. Tyler, if you hear me, blink once. Tyler, and then Tyler blinked. And then he said, Tyler, if you see me, blink twice. And he blinked twice. And again, we lost it again. I mean, everybody lost it. The whole floor lost it. And we thought, this is it. There's no turning back. Now we're going forward. No more rotten meetings in the morning. No more, negative talking. We're going to take control of these meetings, and, that's it. We're going forward no matter what. I mean, there was life. He understood. He heard. He saw. And it's funny because afterwards he told us at Craig, we kept saying, did you, those 6 weeks, what did you remember from Craig? He goes, all I remember was Dad saying, Tyler, Tyler does it. And he said, I had my eyes closed and I would think, Dad, if I could open my eyes, I would, but I can't. And this was their relationship, It was hilarious. And that was the 29th. And from then on, we went forward and, with the rehab. But a little bit of, and Camelia, just step in if I'm missing something, I'm saying, but the one, a lot of events led to things that happened. The firefighters that picked them up that night, we found out later that they are the best. They're called the elite in Phoenix. They're the best firefighter team in Phoenix, and they happened to be on that shift. And we thought, who coordinated that shift but God? Because they were the best. And he did, his heart stopped twice.
Yeah. So because of when we got, before Tyler went to Craig, we got the opportunity to go to the fire station and meet the crew, and couldn't help asking them, tell us about that night. And they said, because a call came overhead, and I said, well, did you hear the details? And he said, we never hear the details until we get into the truck. And they got into the truck, and when they got, it's in an area, it's probably like maybe Southampton, is that, or Campton? What is it here that's, yeah, really bad area of town. It's gunshots for them is common. To get multiple in a night, so it's not something that they're unaccustomed to. So to hear that they're going to go to another gunshot was okay. We'll get in the truck and we'll do that. but then they gave him the details that it was a police officer. And I remember the guy who held his head and said to me, but it was different. It was like I was going to go fight for the life of my brother. I just felt something different when they said it was a police officer. And it is true that fire and police have a very close bond. And they said they got there and all they saw was blood everywhere. They didn't even know where it was coming from. They said
he had so many holes that they were plugging. All of them were just holding holes plugged in, and they noticed his head was bleeding. So that one police officer said, I held his head and put my finger there where he had a hole. He said, and I didn't let go until I handed him to the doctor in the ER. And there was just a pool of blood, and they were all just working, doing their best, doing what they do best.
But they even said, and you know that it's God giving them wisdom and giving them divine intervention, because they said in that fraction of a moment, they had to decide, were they going to work him on the scene, or were they going to scoop and run? And they said, we decided to scoop and run, because that was going to give him a better chance. And they did. He got to the ER that night. From where it happened to St. Joe's is really, really close. But later, some of the police officers shared with us, they pretty much, the streets were all closed off. They made sure that there was nothing in their way to get to the hospital. And when they got there, the other miracle is that doctor, our Santa Claus, because he looked like Santa Claus and dressed like Santa Claus because it was Christmas. His name is Dr. They shared with us that attendings don't usually come down and handle traumas. But that night, that attending came down to work the trauma. And they don't do thoracotomy. So thoracotomy is when they cut your chest open, they pull your ribs apart, and they massage your heart, because you have no volume to take any blood. So giving drugs, doing anything wouldn't help at that moment, because there's no volume. He lost so much blood. So he said he cut it open, and he doesn't do that. That also doesn't happen. They just don't do that, because your survival rate is less than 1% chance if you do a thoracotomy. You are not making it that night. And so it just shows over and over and over that no matter what, God had a plan. He had a plan from a long time ago. He had a plan when they put it on their hearts to pray for something, for them to be a testimony, for them to be something more in this world. And I truly believe that they are. If you see them together on the worst days, I remember when my daughter said to me, Mommy, do you believe Tyler's going to be healed? And I had to tell my daughter that I'm not sure, because I'm having a struggle, because I see medical and I see faith, and I'm having a hard time separating the two. And I'm human, and I had to ask her, please pray so your mom has faith. Because I saw the faith in her, and she never, ever, ever lost it. She has never lost her faith. She has truly believed from that moment, from when she went to his bedside. She knew that that wasn't the end of God's story. He had more to write, and he's been writing it since.
We had a little bit of an inside scoop from the emergency room and what happened that night. Our kids have a friend, he's their age, 30-something, and he was in the ER that night. And he told us the story a few times. I loved hearing it over again. And he said what happened in that emergency room that night has never happened. And some of the nurses have been there 20 plus years, and they've never seen that. Everybody gave it 150%, not 100%. Dr. Guess knew Tyler. We didn't know that at that time. And again, who coordinated that shift so doctor can be on that shift that night was God. And because he was an old doctor that had the courage to do a thoracotomy, these new doctors would have never done it. You know, they don't do it. And he said when Tyler was wheeled in, they knew he was a police officer, so he said they were ready that a police officer was coming in, and they were going to give it 110%. when they wheeled and they thought it was Tyler, when Doc laid eyes on Tyler, he immediately just kind of had a fraction of a second pause and said, and kind of yelled at everybody and commanded everybody to do whatever they needed to do. And he said, that's when he said, I've never seen what happened in this room. And it was just, everybody was working 100 miles an hour. And the efforts that were made to save his life were extraordinary. And we know that God coordinated every single nurse and doctor on that team to be there that night, that had courage and that did what they needed to do. Tyler would go there to that hospital 2-3 times. It was a bad area, not a good area. 2-3 times a week, sometimes with his, clients, whatever they are. I don't even want criminals. And because if there was ever, like if there was an injury or something, they would get him checked out before being booked. You don't want the liability of being sued as the city of Phoenix. So he would come in with his clients, and he would sit by the door, and they would get checked out, sometimes for 2-3 hours. So Tyler would, very friendly, he would talk to everybody from the cleaning crew to and everybody else, so they knew him. And then here's Tyler being wheeled in that emergency room himself. So it was so good for us to hear that everybody gave it 150%. It was so good to see that God was in control of every team. Tyler often says, and when he one of the appointments he had in Colorado, and he was told that his right hearing is completely gone. He has 0 hearing in his right ear. Chelsea told us the story, and we laughed. He said he was in his electric wheelchair, and he looked at the doctor, and he said, God is not done with me yet. And he just wheeled his little wheelchair and walked out of the room. And Chelsea said, I was so embarrassed, I didn't know what to do. I just followed him. But he's very calm. And then, we also talked about the events of that night a few times. And one of the trips to Colorado, because we would go there, oh my gosh, sometimes 3 times a week, sometimes twice, sometimes we'd stay for 3 days, sometimes we'd go for the day. I mean, we're always there between the 2 families and his siblings. And we asked Tyler, how do you feel about, what happened? Because at that time he knew what had happened. And how do you feel? And he said, I'm not bitter. I'm not angry. I pray for this person that shot me. I pray that he finds salvation. I pray that he, finds Jesus. And I'm okay, this was God's plan for my life. And I will do it joyfully, because how would I serve God if I do it and I'm bitter? And that was such a big lesson for me, because I struggled. I mean, with, obviously a part of me did hate him, a little part, but as a Christian, you don't say those words, and you don't want to you want to do right by this person who doesn't know God, and so intentionally shot my son in cruel. And again, as a mother, I struggle, and I've said this to a lot of people, I struggle in the way he was shot, because the first shot was to the head, so he went down. And then to go and, sit on top of him and keep shooting until your gun is empty, to unload your gun in my son, is not okay. And if he would have shot him and ran, it's normal. He's a criminal. He shoots the officer's down, you run. That's what these criminals do. But you have so much malice and hate in your heart to go and just sit over him and just keep shooting until your gun is empty, to shoot, I don't know, him or the other officers, because everybody was on that call. Tyler just happened to come up on this suspect first. And then a little side note about this, because this is important too. When he finished the academy, he came home and he said, he goes, me and a buddy from the academy, we bought our own holsters, and it was like $180 extra, because the one they give you, it doesn't have a double latch, so it's not as safe. So if somebody tries to take your gun, they can do it, but the double latch, is more secure. And I said, oh, honey, don't spend money on things. Just whatever they provide you, it's okay. And you're, new police officer. And he said, no, we're going to do it. We think it's a good idea. No, okay, well, okay, you bought it. Well, that saved his life and other officers' lives. The fact that he's not bitter, he's not angry, Chelsea's not, they have so much peace, they have so much love, they have, joy, and thank God, and it's remarkable. It's remarkable. And we were always testing that's the team, and it's the African-American guy that held his head. And then that's Tyler's tent. We would have prayer time. Our family would come from morning till night and stay there and pray. At 8 o'clock, we'd all close with a prayer and go home and start again the next day. That's December 14th when we went for their 1-year anniversary. And then they named it. They put a plaque on the tent that says Tyler's tent because everybody would witness us praying. That's December 14th, 1-year anniversary. And we would constantly test his mind. And I was visiting in Colorado once, and we were watching. He wanted to watch church. So we turned on church. Chelsea put it on the TV on the screen, and we'd say, "Well, who's this?" And he would name people, and we're like, "Oh my gosh, he's brain is there, and he's okay." What else that
just from I think coming back to the whole reason you're here is that with God, He can change your circumstances. No matter what the circumstances are, you can see that we've had a lot in our life. It wasn't just this, but God can change them. And if He doesn't change your circumstance, He changes you in the circumstance.
Yes.
Because ultimately, all that we go through is for His glory. And how we come and provide that testimony is what changes others and how we support others. And it was very... again, God at work, because that Bible verse that Fratele Semena read was the exact Bible verse that we were bringing forward today, that the reason that we're here is because to comfort somebody else through whatever you might be going through, no matter how big or how small, God is there. He won't always answer you the way you want the answer. I remember the same prayer that Adina and Dan prayed. My husband and I, Radu and I, prayed was for Tyler to have complete healing or for God to take him home, because he was ready. And we all knew that because we knew Tyler and we loved Tyler. He truly is like our son. We truly love him. He fit in from day one in our family. Chelsea loves him in a way that I can't explain. It's a true love story. And it's a testimony of faith that a young 21-year-old daughter taught her 47-year-old mother and everybody around her, that she knew God truly spoke to her and said, you're gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. And she believed him for his word for that moment and gave us faith. There were times where Adina and I walked in, like she would say, because the nights were really rough. We would leave there crying. We would come back crying. And one morning she said, "What's wrong with you two? Don't you see what God's doing?" And He truly had a plan, and He did it every step of the way. We had to, how He ended up in Colorado was a very also God story, because the therapist came out of the blue at the end after we had gone to see this nursing home type looking place, because they had to do a ventilator.
Yeah.
And they were telling us he has to come out of the ICU. He can't stay there anymore.
Even though they kept him for 6 weeks, and the last weeks were really just,
to
hang
keep
out,
him.
to find a place.
Yes.
They were so good to us.
And the therapist came and said, "Well, have you heard of Craig Hospital in Colorado?" And like, "No, we don't know what Craig Hospital is." And it just was part of the path. Craig was part of the journey. Craig was part of his testimony, and there were lives he touched there, people he met there, people that Chelsea now, just that same Bible verse in Corinthians, that Chelsea is able to be a support for a mom whose son is in the ICU in rehab, a very tragic biking accident. He has neurologic deficits. He's having to go home. And they walk through their story together and their journey together. And these are people of faith, so it's a blessing that she can walk another Christian through it. And I think that's really what God tells us today. If nothing else that you take away, that remember, no matter what you're going through, God is there. The answer may not be what you want or how you think it should be, and the answer may not be now, it might be later. And I think that's the other thing to remember, is that the answer comes in His time, not in our time. And
one of the things when he went to when he went to Craig, there was a big team meeting, and Dan and I were supposed to attend. We had tickets. I got a cold and I stayed back, but Dan went to that meeting and Chelsea wasn't on that meeting, but they Zoomed me in, so I was listening to the meeting. And I remember the doctor at Craig said, well, because all the patients at Craig there were 90 patients at that very specialized rehab, and they were either TBI, traumatic brain injury, or spinal. And I remember him saying, well, we're not sure what category Tyler's in because he's not TBI, his brain is there. And that was another huge thing. We wanted to make sure we were always quizzing him. Do you remember the combination to the lock at home? Do you remember, like he was 1 year old, Can you count, because we wanted a lot of, brain injuries, well, the result is, traumatic brain injury. Your brain's not okay. And he's not spinal because he's moving all his limbs. So that's not spinal. And he said, I don't know what category to put him in. And I murmured and said, well, you can create a whole new category and call it a miracle. He's a miracle. It's God's miracle. And, it was such, like Camelia had said, their testimony, their miracle, the messages that we received via, either email or texting or Instagram or Facebook, the messages that I received, my sisters, our adult daughters, I'm sure you guys have, were in the hundreds and hundreds. I had a girl from our church. She's in her 20s. She has 2 little girls. She's been ill a lot her entire life. And she testified and sent me a message and said, Adina, I am so depressed. I've been so depressed for so long because I'm so ill. My marriage is suffering. She said, I'm contemplating things I shouldn't contemplate. And she said, but seeing Tyler's story, she said, and this is what she said. She said, when I heard about Tyler's story, because she knew me, and she's my children's age, she said, I started praying for him, not for me. He said, because she has not come to church. She has been out of the church. She says, I don't pray. I don't really believe in God. I grew up in a Christian family, but why is God putting me through all these trials, being so young? Why can't I be a happy, healthy young mom like everybody else? So she was suffering with a lot of things, and I had no idea. People put on a smile and a nice face, and you don't know what people are battling at home. And she said, but I started praying for Tyler. I thought, not this kid, you're kidding. No. And she said, I was praying with all my heart for Tyler. She said, while I was praying for Tyler, God said, just open my heart, and I started praying for myself, and I wasn't even subconscious of that. And she said, it changed my life. He changed my life. He said, now I pray for myself, even though I'm not healed instantly. I believe God will heal me, and if He doesn't, I have joy in my journey because this is where God wants me. And when I said, you could be on top of the mountain and then in the valley low, or you can be in a consistent illness or suffering, or, children that are in the world and you're praying for them to, come back to the church. There's suffering in this world, and that's the world we live in. And again, the hundreds of messages that we received and lives that were touched are countless. We tried to keep track for a while, and we lost track, and now there's no way. From other countries, from other states. It was, and this is, I think, and like Tyler said, he said, I know, in Chelsea, we kept saying, and I told Tyler, he had gone to ASU for 2 years. He did the police academy, and I said, the only way I'll support you is if you promise me you're going to finish your 2 years at Arizona State, finish your career, blah, blah. And then Chelsea, wasn't sure about going to PA, and they said, maybe we can go to Africa. And we thought, no, you're not going to Africa. I'm thinking in my head, you're going to finish your careers. You're on a great path. Do not deviate. We had a plan when you got married, And, when we fasted December 1st and everything, 14 days later this happened. And now hearing them talk about God's grand plan, and he said, it's not about us. It's about people around us. And these young kids, they want to glorify God. And that's it. Yeah.
And I would
and Dr. who did the thoracotomy on December 15th, we went back a year later, and we had a little celebration at Tyler's tent, and he saw Tyler. He looked at him and he said, oh my goodness, you are not supposed to live, and here you are. You are not supposed to breathe, and here you are. You're not supposed to talk, here you are. You're not supposed to walk, and looks like you will. And he said, you are a miracle. And, that was testified by a lot of the surgeons. They would come in the room and something would happen. And they would look at us and say, he has defined modern medicine, He's done things that are off the chart and out of the scope of service. And he said, they would say, we've never seen this. And, they've watched us pray in that room. They've watched us sing. I would put, by his head, we'd take turns. Sometimes Chelsea would go downstairs and I'd be by myself with him. And I would put specific songs, by his pillow and pray. And in the name of Jesus, and there's a beautiful song, I speak the name of Jesus over you, and the nurse would come in and do her thing, and she would listen to that entire song, because sometimes she'd been there for 20 minutes, and she would look at me and tear up, and then, oh my gosh, the testimonies we had from some of the nurses. We had a male nurse who, oh my goodness, took such great care of him, and the nurses said he had gone through a terrible divorce. His son had cancer, but it was healed, 10-year-old son. He said the nurses testified to him that they had not seen that man smile in 3 years. And he said Tyler made him smile when he opened his eyes. Like, he has not smiled. He's got a grin on his face. He's not happy. He's grumpy. He's always in a bad mood, but he's a great nurse. And we would talk and hug, and he opened up. And then, so many, we could be here all day. And the stories that we heard, and the nurses, and even the ambulance gal that picked him up at the hospital when he had left January 24th. He was moved to Colorado, and the ambulance transport company that came to pick him up at the hospital picked him up, and then I got to ride in the ambulance in front, and Chelsea was in the back with Tyler, and I was in the front with her, and this ambulance driver had never seen us. And she looked at me and she said, I don't know what you guys did in that ICU room up there, but everybody's talking about you guys. She said, you completely changed lives, and you've made such an impact. And she says, I don't know who you people are, but and then we got to the airport. It was a private little airport. They went on a private plane, and I got the scoop again from somebody else that works there. My nephew Daniel is a pilot, and he was there that day. Coincidentally, he was just working. And the pilot that took Tyler, we said a prayer. We got, he got on the flight, and we all said a prayer on the plane. Family, just immediate family was there. Rado and Camelia were in Colorado waiting for them. Yeah, they were on the receiving side. We were on the sending side. And we said a prayer. And that pilot told Daniel later on, he said, when your family was praying over Tyler, I got goosebumps from head to toe, and I felt like I was shaking. He said, I've never felt that in my life. And these stories are endless, like I said, and I've got so many notes, but this is what we want, is God's name to be glorified, not us, not them, just God's name and his love and mercy for us.
And a Bible verse that we would leave you with is James 1:2-4. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may perfect and complete, lacking nothing.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
But they don't know you like we do. There is power in your name. We've heard that there is no way through. We've
This video is just a progress video, and this last picture here was he was at Ace Hardware. He loves that store. It's like a Home Depot, but a small one. And he had, with this therapist, it was the first time that he had been out to walk, and we just got this last week. So this is an updated one. But he also had a stroke when the bullet entered the brain. He had a stroke, so his right side is weaker. So it's coming in. But we have some prayer requests. I know not everybody has social media, and everything's posted on social media, and Chelsea does such a wonderful job updating everybody, but not everybody has social media. And the prayer requests now are for his sensation to come in. It's huge. He doesn't have sensation in his body, very little, because his nerves and neurons, everything has to reconnect in his brain and find new pathways. So that's huge, because even with walking, he's a high fall risk with no sensation. And obviously, you can see he's wobbly, and and even Chelsea touches him, and he feels there's a hand there, but he doesn't feel touch. He doesn't feel cold or hot. We have to tell him, hey, it's cold outside. You need a sweater. It's hot. So it's hard with no sensation. We're praying for sensation. We're praying for his swallowing. He's failed 5 swallow tests, so there's another one coming up soon. His 6th one is coming up soon. He can't eat or drink. He's on a feeding tube, a G tube, and then he is on a catheter, Foley catheter, so we're praying for that sensation to come in so he can start having bowels and bladder regimens on his own. We're praying for his stoma to close, where the ventilator was in place of the neck. There's still a hole where the ventilator was, and it hasn't closed at all. They were hoping it was going to close before the 12-week mark. Yeah, and it has not closed yet. And we're praying, because that's a very invasive surgery that he would have to have, and we're trying to avoid that. And then his hearing is 0, but like Tyler said, God is not done with me yet. And then his eyesight is blurry, because of the right eye is blurry, but he's getting eye therapy, and that one is getting better. So these are the specific, 5 urgent prayer requests that we would have.
Good morning. We wanted to say thank you for inviting our mothers and us to join your conference this weekend. More importantly, to share the testimony of how good the Lord is and how faithful He is. We wanted to thank you for you and your families in the church who has prayed endlessly for us as we are continuing to make miraculous progress. My husband here is going to say a few words at the end as well. If there's anything that we have learned through a very traumatic experience, is the best way to describe it, is that the Lord is faithful to His word. Those words are not in the Bible for no reason. There's not stories there for no reason. He tells us that every word of His proves true. He tells us in Psalms and in Proverbs. He tells us exactly how big of a faith we need to have. And to my understanding, you guys have a mustard seed to see for yourselves that it's very, very tiny, but it is very, very difficult to have and to hold on to in a world that is meant to break you, in a world that is not of the Lord's. And when you have the faith of the seed of a mustard seed, there is wonderful things to encounter, and sometimes it's not what you think it will be. Sometimes you don't just get up and walk and all things return back to the way they were, but you get to experience the indescribable peace He talks about. You get to experience laying it down at His feet, and He will take care of you, that when you seek Him first, all things will be added on to you. And we have seen joy and peace and blessings that are beyond our understanding that we could not have accumulated without all that we have been through. And to be able to be home together in our own house is a blessing that is beyond words. And for Him to know who everyone is and to speak and to love and to build a future together, we just know that the Lord has something in plan, and that no matter how hard the days get and the patience it requires, God is faithful even when we are faithless, and we don't deserve this goodness, and we don't deserve the blessings and the health and the recovery and the wonderful community who prays endlessly for us, even if we are strangers to some and closer to others. We've all come together in the name of the Lord, and it's a beautiful thing that we cannot thank God enough that He commands us, but it's also a privilege to pray about your circumstances. Nothing is ever too small, and nothing is ever too big or impossible for the Lord. And that's just a reminder we would love everyone to share. And if I could just post it on a billboard for all the world to see, I would, because we don't know His plans. We don't know what the outcome will be. We don't know if He will return sooner than we do. But we do know that He has our best interest at heart. He knows what's best for us, and it will be the ultimate reward for the day that we come before Him and get to walk with Him through the gates of heaven, and it'll all be worth every ounce of our being. So we want to encourage that us who are a living testimony or a testament of the Lord and His glory and His mightiness and His faithfulness, the only one who can keep His word. And then I'll let Tyler here say something.
I just wanted to say thank you for praying for us. We really believe that God hears your prayers, hears our prayers, and we just want to say thank you. Thank you.
And we hope that your fellowship afterwards is blessed, and this is the encouragement in your own life so that you may go around and share wonderful, wonderful testimonies for the next generation and the next and the one after. Thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea.